Our focus this morning was on John chapter 11, the resurrection of Lazarus and all that goes on around that. And in this episode, it's probably around 2 months before the crucifixion, and it begins to bring things to a head for the Jews who are seeking to destroy Jesus. Though we haven't reread the whole chapter this evening, it might be helpful, depending on how your mind works, to have the whole chapter open in front of you this evening. So if you can reach it, feel free, but don't feel a necessity to do that if that's not what's best for you. We look this morning at how this chapter glorifies the Son of God, that Jesus deliberately delays to go to Bethany near Jerusalem by 2 days. He delays because he loved Mary and Martha and Lazarus. That this episode is an occasion of the disciples believing in Jesus Christ. It's a very clear demonstration of the absolute power of Jesus Christ. Not that he points to the resurrection and the life, so much that he himself is the resurrection and the life. He is the King who conquers. He is victorious in our darkest hour, in the face of our ugliest enemy, death itself. In Jesus Christ, we have an almighty and an all-knowing God, one who knows us intimately, who sees our desires, who understands our affections, who is fully aware of our deepest struggles. And yet, a God who is God's is still very hard for us to comprehend, because God is ever blessed. That is, he's always happy. God being God, he is a God who does not change because he's perfect. If he was a perfect God and then he changed, well, then he wouldn't be perfect. And if he changed to become a perfect God, that would imply he had not been perfect. God is so incomprehensibly greater than us that we struggle with the definitions of the great confessions of faith. Like the 1689 Baptist Confession, which states that God is infinite in being and perfection, whose essence cannot be comprehended by any but himself, a most pure spirit, invisible, without body, parts, or passions, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto. How can such frail ones as you and I even identify with this God, even though we were made in his image? It is, of course, in Jesus Christ that we see the fullness of the Godhead contained bodily. And wonderfully, we see something of his heart in our text for this evening, John 11:35. Jesus wept. What does this mean? This word wept is only used here in this single example in the Greek New Testament. It has as its root word. It has as its root the word that we get to cry from it. Literally, Jesus cried. Or as William Hendrickson puts it in his commentary, Jesus burst into tears. God cannot cry. Crying is the act of one with lacrimal glands. It necessitates a human body. And yet, when it says Jesus wept, Christ engages with something that is not counter to his divinity. Consider what it means that Jesus wept. His body functions as ours function. When he fasted, he hungered. When he was hung up in the hot sun, he thirsted. When he was tired, he slept, sometimes in such a deep sleep that in the midst of a storm, he wouldn't awaken. His weeping speaks of his humanity, and none of that contradicts his glorious divinity, but it perhaps does express his heart in a way that we can more clearly understand and grasp. At a time of profound emotion, tears are the natural reaction. But what's the cause of his tears? I'm not confident it is one simple thing. His tears are not some hypocritical performance where he's just putting on a mask for the sake of those around him. He cries because that is the right response, and it's a response from a heart that is stirred within him, not crying because that's what is expected of him right now. Consider the emotions that are already stirring in the heart of Christ. In verse 33, we read of how he groaned in the spirit and is troubled. Literally, the Greek has this idea, apparently, of snorting like a horse. It's an expression of indignation, perhaps almost even anger. The emotions of Christ are truly troubled, even agitated. There's a distress, there's a disturbance within, and it's repeated in verse 38, which is why I read that far. Jesus again groaning in himself. What's the specific motivation for these tears? Well, verse 33, when Jesus saw Mary weeping and the Jews who come with her weeping, he groans in the spirit, he's troubled. He says, where have you laid him? They say, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. It's as Jesus sees the weeping of Mary and the weeping of the Jews with her. He asks where Lazarus is laid. He's taken to the tomb. Jesus wept. He weeps from a shared humanity, from grief and distress, from sorrow at the hardness of man's heart, from the ruin and tragedy that this world is undergoing. He is sharing in the sadness of his beloved friends. Though he is truly God, none of this is incompatible with his divinity. Rather, as the incarnate Son of God, his human responses display something of the reality of the heart of the Father. Here he stands in a cemetery, the abode of the dead. This was not how he originally made the world. That world that he made was a place declared as very good. This world, it's a place of ugliness and loss. There's no stoical calmness in Jesus where, knowing that he's about to resurrect Lazarus, to restore him to his sisters, well, he need not weep because all will be well. Our Saviour understood God's sovereignty better than any Calvinist, but still he weeps. No, in this situation right now, grief is appropriate. Sin brings death and judgment. And right at this point, he is in a world that is suffering the righteous judgment of God. That's his own judgment in that sense. And yet still he feels the tragedy of it. He is moved to tears at the state of the world and at the grief of his friends. Here's a family he loves with a distinct and a particular love. They've shared with him, they've met with him, they've followed him, they've trusted in him, and they are hurting. Their griefs are his. He identifies with them in their grieving. There may even be indignation, that sense of anger in his tears, that he has come to present such good to the souls of men. And there are those present who will not trust in him as they ought, but rather, when they see the glorious sign that he's about to perform, they're just going to go to the Jews and tattle on him to further reject him. His tears and his griefs speak of his humanity, of his suffering alongside his people, of his fellow feeling with his loved ones. I hope this makes some sense to you. We read of tragedies in some far off place, and we're saddened. But when someone we know is going through loss, it feels so much worse. And in that sense, it should, because there's now that personal friendship element. Reality can bite so much harder when we identify with the pain, when the story of a lost child hurts on a whole new level because now you've got a child of your own. Or you imagine yourself in that position of bereavement or despair that someone you know and love is facing. Speaking of the all-encompassing, all-surpassing glory of Jesus Christ and his position as the pinnacle of all that God has said and done, the writer says that to neglect the salvation found in Jesus Christ alone means we have no hope of escaping sin and all its consequences. Jesus Christ is set up over all that God has made as the one who is crowned with glory and honor. His exaltation follows his humiliation, whereby he tastes death for us all. Jesus Christ, who is truly God, who needs nothing to complete him, is made perfect through sufferings. That is, perfect can also be translated complete. That is, Jesus Christ, who being God needs nothing, he chooses to join himself to a people. And then, because he has joined himself to that people, without them, he is incomplete. And so to be complete, to be perfected in that sense, he must have his people. He's not ashamed to call them his brethren. Rather, he delights to be in the midst of them, praising the Father. He is identified with his beloved ones such that he partakes of their flesh and blood, seeing what we see, feeling what we feel, living as we live. For he is our childhood's pattern, Day by day, like us, he grew. He was little, weak and helpless. Tears and smiles, like us, he knew. And he feeleth for our sadness, and he shareth in our gladness. In all these things, he was made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in all things pertaining to God. This is what the tears of Jesus mean, that this man sees us. He knows us. He feels for us. He stands alongside us. He endures what we are enduring. Spurgeon's sermon on this text says so many wonderful things. Just go home and look up Spurgeon's sermon 2091, and you'll be better than this. But one of the wonderful things Spurgeon says in his pithy way, God had only one son without sin, but he had no sons without sorrow. Believer, when you sorrow, the heart of Christ feels what you feel. He has stood in your place. He has felt this loss and this pain. And though he is now enthroned in glory, his heart is still unchanged. At the grave of Lazarus, Jesus wept. One reason for his weeping is the absence of his friend. In his divinity, then and now, he's present in all places because God is present in all places. But in his humanity, in this episode in John 11, he's confined to that Bethanian cemetery. He is away from Lazarus, the one he loves. This morning, after this morning's sermon, someone asked me the wonderful, logical, tantalizing question, where was the location of Lazarus's soul for those 4 days? Well, where Spurgeon does not dare venture an opinion, how can I say anything? But wherever Lazarus's soul was to be found, at this point, he was not physically with Jesus. And Jesus desires the fullness of the presence of his people then and now. When we come to him in prayer, we have a high priest who sympathizes with us. He has the same feelings as us and with us in our struggles. He has been tested as we all are, but he was without sin and failure in his testing. In the light of that, says Hebrews 4, verse 16, let us come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Consider what is said about the role of the high priest in Hebrews 5, verses 1 to 11. The writer says, for every high priest taken from among men is appointed for men in things pertaining to God, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is also subject to weakness. Because of this, he is required, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer sacrifices for sins. And no man takes this honor to himself, but he who is called by God, just as Aaron was. So also Christ did not glorify himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, you are my son, today I have begotten you. And as he also says in another place, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with vehement cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his godly fear, though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. And having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him, called by God as high priest, according to the order of Melchizedek, of whom we have much to say and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. Remember Caiaphas this morning. He was high priest in the land in that year. He was supposed to be the prime example in the land of the one who more than anyone else pointed to what Messiah should look like, the one who interceded between God and men. But Caiaphas was vile, venal, hypocritical. Christ, however, fulfills the role perfectly. He offers sacrifice for sin. He gives gifts to men. As the Son of God, he is eminently acceptable to God, and he is able to completely represent man as he is the Son of Man. And seeing those who go astray, he's filled with compassion. He knows the weakness and frailty of human flesh, though he himself does not have the fallenness of human flesh. He's appointed high priest in the highest role, the role of Melchizedek, the great kingly priest of Salem, to whom Abraham came in reverence. And Jesus Christ is an irreplaceable high priest, because there can only ever be one high priest at a time. Caiaphas was high priest in that year, But Jesus Christ will never be replaced, for he will never die in his office. He is now and forever the great high priest. In the days of his flesh on earth, before glorification, he was heard by the Father. He offered up prayers and supplications for his lost loved ones with strong and mighty cries and tears. His intercession is full. It touches all of his humanity as well as all of his divinity, as he longs for the fullness of the uniting and restoring of all of his people. Jesus wept. He weeps, filled with emotions, seeing the grief of his friends, knowing the sadness of loss, aware of the still unbelieving hearts of some, and grieved at the imperfect and disturbed and damaged state of this world. He who weeps at the graveside is our pattern, our ensample. So, my friend, I ask you, do you weep? Does the grief of others move you? Do you miss those whom you can no longer be with, you no longer see? Does a world of unbelievers out there stir you to passionate anger or sorrowful, perhaps even indignant prayer? Are you longing, as all of creation is, for the unveiling of God's glory and this world's deliverance from the bondage of corruption? Paul writes that all creation is groaning for that time. Can you empathize with that? If you are Mr. Stoic, Mrs. Unmoved, Miss Emotionless, how Christ-like are you? By all means, we're different people with different temperaments and different personalities. And yes, we can discuss this afterwards. There's a difference, though not a great difference, between the typical Welshman and the typical Englishman. And of course, there's a danger of being carried away by emotion when our hearts are not truly moved, but we're merely putting on a show or even virtue signaling. But if you never weep, you are not resembling our incarnate Christ in his time on earth. If you never weep, it may be that you need to love others more so as to feel their sufferings also. That's the command given to believers in Romans chapter 12, the instructions of how we are to live rightly. Bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. If we live in a world without weeping, maybe then we need not weep ourselves, but so long as there is one eye weeping in this world, at times it is our duty to be weeping with those who weep. Surely you mourn over lost, departed ones. Now, we can protect ourselves from that grief by never making deep connections in this life, because grief is the price we pay for love. But then, if we never have that depth of love towards anyone, that we might never feel that grief, how are we honoring the commands of God to love others? Is it easier to condemn a world of sinners in all of their drunkenness, their immorality, their debauchery, their indolence, their idolatry? Is that easier than to truly intercede for them as Christ intercedes for his lost sheep? Is the idea of mourning over the state of this present world strange to you? Because actually you're quite comfortable here. You see no need to be too fervently looking for that unseen world that is to come. Well, my friend, be like Jesus. Jesus wept. There are times when you and I must also weep. Weeping is right at times in this world. Of course, there are times of joy and celebration. Of course, we rest confidently in the finished work of Christ. But we walk by faith and not by sight, and at times the pains of this world will be very real and very raw. There is a day to come when weeping will be no more, at least the weeping of sorrow. A time will come when for all those in glory there will be nothing but joy upon joy. If there are any tears at all, they're only tears of unalloyed joy. And if there are tears of joy, well, each one of them will be wiped away by the hand of our God. But until then, we're passing through a veil of sorrows. We must not think ourselves greater than our great high priest. Jesus wept. And what if this Jesus means nothing to you? He seems at best irrelevant. You're not one who is walking by faith. Why should you care about his tears? Well, let me tell you about a people over whom Jesus wept who rejected him. A few days or a couple of weeks on from this episode, in the week running up to his death, Jesus is drawing near to Jerusalem. Now, as he drew near, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, "If you had known, even you, especially in this your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you, and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. And they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation." He looks and he sees the city of his death. He sees the judgment coming upon them in future time. It's right, it's just, it's fair. And still he weeps. My friends, if you reject Jesus today, know that he wept over the likes of you. His tears flowed freely for unrepentant lost ones. Can you yet resist and oppose him? Let's sing before we come to the communion table, singing of this Christ in his humanity and what he has endured for the sins of this world. Hymn 194. Who is this, so weak and helpless, child of lowly Hebrew maid, rudely in a stable sheltered, coldly in a manger laid? 'Tis the Lord of all creation, who this wondrous path hath trod. He is God from everlasting, and to everlasting God. 194.